Good morning, everyone. Happy, what is it? January, February, March, April 15th. Sometimes I can't automatically connect April with the fourth month in the year. So I still do it on my fingers. But look, that's vulnerability at its finest. It's great to be with all of you, guys. It's so good to see all of your faces. Man, middle of the month, all the way through Q1, and according to our last mastermind, and this is probably something that we as coaches coach on the most, and that is literally everyone is struggling with the team, something around the team. Who do I hire? When do I hire? What's the clarity of roles? Those were a lot of themes in working with everyone in the tribe on our collective mastermind just 2 weeks ago. So today we're really going to get into it, and a lot of thought now going into maybe how to repurpose these people. What does the future look like as the landscape's starting to change a little bit? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited about this topic. As you mentioned, Mark, it is by far the most requested topic of feedback. Probably 80% of the questions that I've gotten over my career have been about this.
And I think last year was.
Hi, Josh.
I was just going to say, I think last year was a tough year. I think it was a year that we all muddled through. It was a triage year. We did the best that we could. I know in our group, we're trying to, draw a line in the sand and say the trauma and the triage of 2020 is officially over. Let's go back to the basics, blocking and tackling. Do we have the right players in the right place? And what adjustments do we need to move forward in 2021? And I think that's where we're going to keep rocking today, is to jump right into that team structure and how to make sure to hire the right person and how to go about that decision-making process.
It's funny you say that, Josh. I just pulled up with my team and I was like, hey guys, remember in October when we had all these plans and we were going to do this, and then we got absolutely waylaid by a tsunami? We're going back to that right now, and we're going to figure this out and where we want to go, and kind of just right now we're starting. So the line in the sand really resonated with me, man.
Yeah, guys, doing loans is not the hard part. Doing a lot of loans is. And so it takes leadership. It takes the blueprint. It takes scale. Every loan officer, I love telling our real estate professionals this. I say, every loan officer is really good until they're not. What I mean by that is, as soon as you start getting more business than you have hours in a day, and you don't have people to delegate to and who can create consistency in your system, then you start not hearing from that loan officer, or things take longer, or mistakes get made because they're working at 2 a.m. So if you're really good and you believe in yourself, you have no other choice but to grow your team. So really excited to share this content today.
Yeah, you know what came up for me when I heard Josh talking about what 2020 was. I think as an industry, we all just recognized we needed any support we could get to basically be able to charge and push through. And so we brought people on without a lot of clarity around roles. It was just help anywhere you can, plug any hole you can plug. And while it got us through, it certainly is not creating consistency and experience. And it's also leaving a lot of people wondering, what is my actual role here? And so I think this is relevant if we're evaluating our teams, or if you want to take it all the way back and say, hey, I'm actually making my first hire right now. What do I need to do? And so I think for us, kind of breaking this down, a great place to start would be what does that look like? What is step one when somebody says, hey, I need to grow, I need to scale, I need to bring somebody on because it has gotten to a point that I just can't handle it anymore?
So, Chris, I do want to share though that from my view, this problem has persisted past 2020. Right. While 2020 was definitely that year that just magnified all of the challenges. I mean, I can think back to, 2014, 2013, hiring team members and how badly I managed that process. And the process I followed was I waited till I was in pain, and I didn't have any leading indicator measurement of when I was going to be in pain. I waited till I was in pain. And then the first barista or waiter that brought me and filled up my iced tea without me asking, I'm like, that's a production partner right there. That's customer service. And I can tell you all the different areas of my life where I was like, wow, this person's a closer. Like, I definitely want this person in my business. And then they got in, and look, as salespeople, we're natural optimists, right? We see the best in everyone. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I mean, I know they have like
Cliffhanger.
Just
What do they have?
Yeah, exactly. I know they have these 10 flaws, but if I can just build on this one strength I see in them in this interview, they're going to be an absolute rock star. Bring them into the business. 9 months later, I'm pounding my head against the wall, wondering how I can get them out of there because they're stealing bagels from the break room and everybody's upset. The team's wondering how, I as a leader could have made such a bad choice, right? But it all started with being reactionary and not proactive and not having a process to follow. So that's what we're going to offer you here today. The problem is this needs to be a proactive and systematized event in your business. It cannot be reactionary, or you're going to be in this pound puppy mode where the cutest dog in the pound comes into your business, and then they're peeing on your rug.
Yeah.
You're on fire today, Danny.
Analogies
Bagels and
are
puppies.
You're so on point with the bagels and the puppies. And as you were saying that story, I was laughing because I've told so many people. It just blows my mind that people come to me for help on the team, because I have literally done what Danny just said. 4 or 5 times hiring the wrong people until you find the right one, and then you hire a different way. And I feel like you have to go through some of those mistakes to really feel the pain and learn. So hopefully you guys will take it from us. There'll be no bagels and no puppies, and you'll get this thing right from the beginning. Danny, why don't you start us off, bud?
Yeah, Val, if you can just share the first slide, right? And team, we are going to get tactical here. We are going to share with you, like, this is who you hire. These are the job descriptions. This is what you pay them. That is insight that we will be providing you over the next, series of sessions here. But we want to start at the beginning, right? We have to start with the process by which we even arrive at who should be hired when, right? And then we can kind of give you the prescription, what that looks like. So pre-hire work, the first thing you need to establish is where you actually need help. Because oftentimes your area of pain is not necessarily the area where you need to hire. And so what we've done inside of the tribe, and many of you have already experienced the assessment that we give on the 22 areas of your life and business that we believe are the most impactful lever points or leverage points for you to be intentionally growing into in order for your business to kind of get to that level 10 business. So one of those 22 areas is the focus areas. What are inside of these 5 categories of activity, and we'll give you some examples of what fall into these buckets. Inside of these 5 areas of activity, which one or maximum 2 do your genius zone activities fall into? And we'll give you a little bit of insight on how to do that exercise. But the 5 focus areas are leadership, lead generation, lead conversion, transaction management, and then client for life is really about post-closing, not just the experience that you give them, at the closing table or when you send them the gift, but that long tail of activity that kind of gives you the ability to kind of earn their business again in the future. So establishing your genius zone is one of the important steps in finding out where you need help. The second is doing a time tracking exercise of where your ROI and ROE. So this is return on investment and return on energy. So the tactical step here, and I recommend you start this process, as soon as next Monday. It's good to have a good 2-week phase starting with the beginning of your week. And I'm going to just share what this tactic is. We actually have a document that we'll be sharing with the tribe that you can use as a tool to do this exercise. But if you happen to be an Outlook user or a Google Calendar user, you can actually do this electronically instead of using a form for it. So the way that we recommend doing time tracking is in 15-minute blocks. Look at your calendar and make sure that each of your 15 minutes is filled with some activity, even if it's having lunch or spending time with your kids, whatever it is that you're doing in that 15-minute increment. And then score that activity based on the 1 out of 10 impact it had on your return on investment, like how much impact it would have on your business, and then a 1 out of 10 assessment of how fulfilling that activity was, how much energy that it created for you. Josh, you're an absolute pro at this. Would you mind kind of adding in?
It's funny, when I did this for the first time, this was similar to trying to get me to like climb Mount Everest naked. Like, it was the last thing on the face of the earth that I wanted to do as a high D, to track my time. And I got drug into the exercise by my coach, literally kicking and screaming. I'm not kidding. It's the only task that I just would not do from a coach. Interestingly enough, I learned more in this exercise than I have in any exercise I've ever done in coaching. And it was this realization of two things. Number one, we don't know where we spend our time. Like, we don't. We go through our day, we have coffee, we have our routine, we drive into the office, we do our thing, and then at the end of the day, we're exhausted and we leave. What actually happened through that period of time, most of us really don't know what's going on, unless you're just a total calendar every 15 minutes type of a environment. So the tracking exercise for me, I made it super simple. I'm not good at Excel spreadsheets. I just simply took out a yellow piece of paper, and I wrote every 30 minutes, I had my Apple phone go off, an alert, 30 minutes on a timer. And then every 30 minutes, I just write down 3 words. What are the 3 things I did, or what are the things I did for the last 30 minutes? And at the end of a week, a pattern started to arise. I started to be able to see the picture through the clouds. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm spending all my time in these places. And then we go through this activity. The second thing I learned is to bifurcate, or separate rather, the difference between return on investment and return on energy. If we find ourselves doing things that are high return on investment, but low return on energy constantly, we get burned out. We then start using substances. It's a downward spiral. So we want to make sure we track our time, we figure out where we're using it, and then we start to focus our time and energy on high return on energy, high return on investment. Everything else can be delegated away.
Yeah, and guys, how many of you, can relate to this? You go to a mastermind seminar in Vegas or in San Diego, and you see someone talking on stage, and they're like, here's the first person you hire, and this is what you have them do. And you just go out and you hire those people. And it may not have fit exactly what you need in your business. And a lot of people will say, hey, who do I hire first? What do they do? And I think if you do this pre-work of the actual tracking, you can analyze what is it that you're really good at, and do you really love? And you can start to build your team around you and your leadership, and fill in the weaknesses, rather than a one size fits all. I think to a certain degree, you need some structure around it for sure, and you need some guidance. But I've seen people be great operators that are tremendous, leaders, and maybe not doing so much on the prospecting side as they are, actually fundamentally running the operation, and vice versa. And so I think really figuring out where you excel and where you want to be and where you spend your time is so important to do that pre-work up front.
And team, in addition, I want to add a little bit to this too, is that this is time where you'll be able to leverage it into other aspects of this process. This is not just an exercise for you, although you will get tremendous value out of it. Even if you're not in the process of building a team, there could be things on your list of activities that you need to say no to. There's a lot of power behind this exercise that can be leveraged into a lot of different opportunities as far as it relates to your life and business. But very tactically speaking here, there's a slide later here where we ask some questions that need to be answered in order to develop a really strong job description. But if all you had was your time tracking sheet with your high ROI, low ROE activity, and you just looked at that group and you chunked that out into a Word document, immediately you would have a job description for somebody that you should be adding to your team. It's like, these are the things they need to do. They're high ROI. My business needs this person to survive, but for me, it's low ROE. I need somebody on my team that complements me, where this activity is high ROE for them, because everybody's built a little bit differently. And if we complement our teams with people that like the things we don't like, that's really where the magic starts to happen. And this time tracking exercise will allow you to facilitate and identify who those people might be.
Hey, I want to add one more thing on this because, this is where it really hit home for me when I did this exercise. I think all of us can relate to the fact that we are extremely hard workers. Like there is no lack of effort that is put in a given day. But where it really hit, and I think once the awareness of ROE came to be was when I looked at my days and I said, I can now identify days that I get to the end of it and I'm actually energized and I'm more fulfilled because I spent my time in those high ROE versus the ones, and for me, I'll tell you what it is. If I spend my day and all of a sudden there's a fire drill and a loan, and now I'm, reaching out to the underwriter to try to work through it, and then I need to call escrow to make sure that we can get docs out, and can you call the borrower? And then I got another fire that I have to put out from a transaction management standpoint. Super high ROI focus areas, but very low ROE. And I would get to the end of the day and have worked hours and hours and hours and hours and be completely burnt out versus my energy being put in those high ROE, which is the lead generation, the lead conversion to where complete fulfillment happens. And if you can keep yourself there, the power that you have pushing through, it allows you to accomplish even more.
Chris, I just want to share two anecdotal stories really quickly to kind of take this from theory to practical. When I did this exercise, I was, after hating it, I was so in love with it that I asked my LOs on my team to do it. And here's two things that came out of it that blew my mind. One of them was an LO brought back their timesheet, and I saw that he was spending 3 hours every Saturday mowing his lawn and doing his landscaping. And I'm like, bro, you must just love like getting the sun and the Blue Jays and mowing the lawn. He's like, I freaking hate mowing my lawn. And I'm like, dude, do you know how much money you make an hour? Divide it out, right? You made $350,000, $400,000 last year. Divide that out by 2,080. Figure out your hourly wage, and you're wasting 3 hours of your week mowing your lawn. Hire a freaking lawnmower, bro. Go take your kids fishing. And it's just one of those things that he had done for 15 years. And by tracking your time, all of a sudden you can see the picture through the fog. The other one that I thought was hilarious was one of my other LOs, very successful LO, had moved, and his dry cleaner was on the other side of town. So I'm looking at his time tracking, and I'm seeing that he's got this 45 minutes to dry cleaning, 45 minutes back from dry cleaning, and his time tracking. I'm like, what are you doing? Are you dating the girl at the dry cleaning place? And he's like, I don't know. I just don't trust any other dry cleaners. I'm like, oh my gosh, bro, like find somebody to come to your house. You're never driving to a dry cleaner again. They're coming to your house. So this exercise, although tedious and annoying, I promise you, you'll learn something about your habits that you just, we're in a program, we're running, we're day to day, we're survival, we're rolling. We're not thinking from 30,000 feet down how we're spending our time. And I know you'll learn something that'll be very, very beneficial for you if you do it.
And just some other context of this team, and this is kind of another perspective to kind of think of this as you're going and evaluating your time, because this was a challenge I had when I did this. I was like, well, I can kind of feel my feelings, and I know that this was, high ROE or high ROI, but how do I kind of define this and kind of put myself into the right mindset? And this construct is another approach that you can take to this, which is that all of us have a zone of genius. These are things that we're uniquely suited to do. When we do them, we feel like this is our superpower. This is what we were put on the earth to accomplish. And unfortunately, when I was reflecting on my time and doing the time tracking, so few of my hours were spent in my zone of genius. Most of my time, fortunately, was spent in my zone of excellence, things that I was pretty good at. I'd kind of carved out a good, cadence in my week and day to where I could really make the most use of my time. But there were still things that were in this zone of competence and zone of incompetence. And because this is related to how do you build out a job description, how do you identify who you hire, this zone of competence area is really the main focal point. Zone of incompetence also, in the case that those items have high ROI for your business, you'll want to definitely pull those out, but certainly the zone of competence area. So as you're going through, you'll kind of see, what is it that really is uniquely suited to your talents and capabilities. And as leaders, almost always, those are leadership and lead generation, but not necessarily. But I would definitely look to those areas first.
And one thing too, guys, is you're going to oftentimes get stuck in your zone of excellence, right? It's because it's where you earn a good living, right? Most people are they stand in that space because they haven't trained a teammate to be able to replicate themselves in that space. And that's what we're teaching in team building today, is how to get clear on the zone of excellence can be done by other people, right? You are good at it, but other people can also be good at it. The genius zone is stuff that's really just you. Like nobody could replicate that. And potentially somebody could come along and help you in those areas, but you want to spend the majority of your time in that top right zone. A lot of people get stuck in the zone of excellence because they can calculate return on investment and it's decent return on energy. Ideally, you're not in zone of incompetence at all. Sometimes you're going to be in zone of competence quite a bit, but zone of excellence is actually the most dangerous zone, right? Because you believe that you're going to continue to make good money there, but you're never going to reach your true potential unless you can get to that top right zone.
You want to mute,
Mark?
Mark?
You're muted.
That's a really good point. That landed for me. I don't know why I talked louder, because I just unmuted myself. It's like you're good. It's like you're going to be able to hear me better. But I really resonate with that, because it was so hard for me to believe that somebody else could do what was in my zone of excellence. I think it took me a long time to figure that out, and I think that's a place where I see a lot of other people struggle as well. So I feel like you really hit the nail on the head with that, man.
Hey, I've got a question for you guys. As I'm even thinking through this right now, what have you guys done to work through identifying your real genius zone? Like what practical exercise have you done to really help identify?
Yeah,
Timber made us all do it.
Yeah. Obviously, the coaching group we're a part of helped with that a lot. But I would say, to Josh's earlier point about the alarm going off, at the end of every hour, when I did this exercise, not only would I write down what I did, but I'd also do a kind of a survey on how I felt. So, for example, when I get done talking to a real estate professional about how I believe our mortgage practice can help them grow their real estate practice and how I think we can be a really great partner, I could do 9 of those in a day, back to back to back, and then I could go home and I could go from 5th gear to 6th gear with my family. Right. So I know that influence is one of my genius zones, and it's a really great return energy for me. Conversely, if I'm doing administrative work, or working in payroll, or doing things that are necessary and somebody has to do, or even something that would be a good zone of excellence would be talking to a client, right? Like having a consultation with a potential homeowner. I used to do 4 or 5 of those a day. And by the end of the day, I would just want to leap off the building, because I was just so drained. It was the same conversation over and over again, and it was variations of it, but I had a challenge getting up for the next one. And by the 4th or 5th person, hopefully here, none of those people know who they are, but they didn't get the full version of me, right? The first couple did. And so just quantifying at the end of that activity how it made you feel, and if you could do a lot of those, is helpful.
Yeah, and I remember going back through the 2 weeks of time tracking, Chris, and literally circling the things that gave me energy, and then trying to put them in this grid of, is this in my genius zone or is it in my excellence zone? Because your zone of excellence will give you some energy, and it starts to form a pattern, like Josh said. You'll see these patterns. And the ones, to Ryan's point, the influencer meetings, those are a 10 on your energy, and you'll just start to see those things. And for me, it was very few things that were in my genius zone. It was just 1 or 2 items.
I'll answer it just a little bit differently. I agree with everything that you just said, but I'll give it just a little different perspective. For me, when I think about something that's high return on energy, I'm glowing. I feel expansive. I feel free. I feel energized, right? There's an energy about that activity that makes me just want to, jump up and scream in a good way. On the other hand, when I'm doing something that's low return on energy, I feel tight. My breath is short. I'm constricted. My energy isn't as exuberant, and I actually have physical manifestations that if I pause for a minute and take a deep breath and I just go like, holy cow, man, there's like a lot of pressure, up here. I'm having a hard time breathing. Like that's when I'm in accounting, or that's when I'm in benefits, or that's when I'm in, a loan that I realize we need to deconstruct and figure out what we could have done better. So I would say the other thing, in addition to what you guys said, was just pause as you're going through this exercise and just check in with yourself. Like, how's my energy? Am I bubbling? Is it flowing? Is it free flowing? Or is it constricted, dammed, and all kind of stuck? And those would be some really good indicators too, if you'll take a second to pause and think about your personal energy.
That's great. I appreciate it, guys. I definitely need to go back and do this exercise again with that, from that lens or that mindset.
I'll do it with you. I could use a retread. Everybody should do it.
Yeah,
I'll
totally
commit to
agree with
that. The whole tribe for the next 2 weeks. I feel like we should throw a challenge out. All of us should show up that way.
Yeah, I'm in. Definitely count me in. And kind of moving to this next slide, team. Actually, I'll make a comment before we move to this next slide. I know I believe from the experience of the feedback that we've gotten, and then past experience with other team members, that the real value is the tactical ability to deploy this, right? To hear, someone tell you, hey, look, you need this person in your business. And this is their job description, et cetera. And as I said, we do have that information for you. But the reason we spend a lot of time on mindset and process is that this is the area where real change is made, that real sustainable improvements can be made in your business, is if you actually improve the way that you can approach the problems in your business versus just having the solution kind of attacked in a one-off way. And then as it relates to this slide, the comment that I have, and what you'll kind of notice from some of the examples, is that there's more than one currency at play. So when you evaluate return on investment, don't only think of dollars when you think of your return on investment. High ROI, high ROE, time with family, and that might be something very specific for you. You're not going to, nobody's going to come to your house and give you your check for being a good mother or father, right? But there's definitely a currency that's traded, in that activity that should be accounted for when you're doing your time tracking. And you can kind of see how that kind of flows into the rest of these. Does anybody have anything to add to that?
I think it was well said.
So here, this slide is really only intended to provide some examples to you so you can kind of get anchored into a tangible way that you can do this exercise. But when you do block your time, so first step is track your time. And then the second step is to bucket the activities over that 2-week span into one of these 4 buckets, right? When you did that thing, when you returned emails for 30 minutes, where did that fall for you, right? When you had the Jones file that was, not clear to close and the moving man was coming, where did that fall for you, right? On this list. And then from all of those buckets of activity, you're going to start to, what will emerge is that pattern that will tell you what the job description of that next hire needs to look like for your team.
Danny, can I suggest one more step in the process?
Of course.
So it's time block every 30 minutes, just a few words, what you did for the last 30 minutes. And then at the end of each day, I would go through and I would score each of those activities, return on energy and return on investment. So to the right-hand side of that, I'd put 9/7. And I know, this is ROI and ROE. And then at the end of 2 weeks, you've got your daily log and you've already scored if it's high return on energy, high return on investment. And then after you've scored it, then at the end of the period, then put them into these blocks. So
that's great. Yeah, you want to capture the emotion of it in real time, or your assessment of it in real time, not looking back 2 weeks and going, oh shoot, how did I feel? When I was doing that, where should this fall? Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Correct.
And team, to support you in as well, right? When we talk about creating a job description or identifying who that hire is, we talked about the 5 focus areas and where your genius zone kind of falls inside of these 5 focus areas. So the great part about our business is that there's a very finite number of tasks that have to be completed to create a phenomenal client experience, which translates into a growing business. Now, that finite number is large. It's in the hundreds, right? But it's not infinite. And what we've done in order to support you in this is essentially broken down these 5 categories into kind of some assessments of what these things might look like. And I'm not going to go and read through all of these. This content will be available on the Triibe e-learning platform for you to do an assessment. But when you're talking about leadership, right, this is about setting a path, right? Creating a vision and constructing a roadmap that vision is going to be following. Lead generation is pretty intuitive, creating the funnel that's going to feed your business. Leads are your fuel. And that fuel, has activity that leads to, people coming to you and kind of asking for your help. Does anybody want to add anything to either leadership or lead generation?
Yeah, I'll add a little bit. I want to go back to to leadership. And what's interesting about leadership is all of the focus that we put into our business as we're growing and evolving is around the transaction management, the lead generation, the lead conversion. We don't really spend a lot of time on the leadership. That has to be a very intentional growth area that you need to focus. But what leadership is going to allow you to do is it's going to allow you to identify and make better hires. It's going to allow you to create a better training and onboarding experience, create more fulfillment out of those individuals that are part of the team that are going to allow them then to execute at that higher level. So I think that leadership to me is one that, I don't want to get off on a tangent on this, but a lot of people have insecurities around, well, I'm not a great leader. Well, is it that you're not a great leader, or we have not invested the time in developing those leadership skills? And as we all start growing in our business, this is an area that I think is super, super important that we give the right amount of attention to in order to truly be able to scale the business and empower the people that are part of our team.
Yeah, and another point of leadership is, I think Danny has it on here, is it's culture, right? It's, on the bottom there, culture setting and development. One of the things I was not great at all as I was building my team initially was managing or even defining a culture. I would just bring someone in and we would allow them to do their job and they would work, and there wasn't a congruous effort, and we weren't all paddling in the same direction. And it wasn't until I realized that we had some bad apples and there were some people that were challenging, and not necessarily in a way that was obvious, but in a way that was a little bit underhanded and hard to see. And so really being protective of your culture. Anytime I'm talking to a recruit or somebody we're planning on bringing in now, that's the number one conversation I have is, more than anything, we protect our culture. So I get really clear on, we ask a lot of questions. Part of protecting that is really having a defined hiring process. And if you're the only one interviewing that person, it's a miss. You need your team to interview them because you need your team to have buy-in, which also protects and helps create culture. And then that person feels like they're more of included when they come in because they know more than just you as the hiring manager. So really being clear on what you all stand for, what it means to be a part of your team, not just culture in terms of client-facing culture, but employee connectivity. So that's a huge, huge part of leadership, and one that if it's missed, all the other stuff doesn't really even matter.
I'll just
add anything to that, or Danny?
Yeah, I'll just add one concept to this that I've, the tribe may have heard me say in previous calls, which is that there's a big difference between having somebody on your team that's a patriot versus a mercenary. A mercenary shows up for the money, but a patriot is fighting for the cause, right? They're fighting for the flag, right? Which is your team's mission. And they'll go above and beyond when they understand what it is that you stand for and what your team and your brand stand for. That goes far beyond the money. So the culture setting and the cultural development is what establishes that mission in their mind and aligns them with it so that they can show up even bigger than the money would normally motivate.
Yep, I couldn't agree more with all of this. And I think you should highlight the point that, Chris was making. Guys, don't be afraid to step into this. Step in and lead your team. Set the tone with that culture. Chris, I know that's you because I can hear the peacocks in the background. But step into leadership. No, we didn't sign up to be leaders. We signed up to be loan officers, to make great money, to really, help families. But as your team grows, you are the captain of the ship. You're going to set the tone for this culture. And I got to be honest with you, the team culture is great. It makes working so much more fun. And it's so important, not just for you, but for your team. So I think that's why leadership isn't highlighted a lot, is because we didn't really sign up for it, right? But you really need to step into it, and don't be afraid to do that. If you're struggling with that, feel free to hit us up. A lot of us can help you with that.
One thing to note, though, is that your first hire or even your fifth hire is probably not going to be a leader, right? But being able to establish kind of what your mission is and how you see your business growing will inform how and who you hire. Does anybody want to comment on lead generation before we move to the next ones?
I think, did we already establish kind of the hierarchy of these? Like how each one is infinitely more important than the next from the bottom up?
Yeah, I did. I said it on a previous call, but I'll reinforce it here. You know, if you imagine these 5 categories, and if you think about the supply and demand of them, right, in terms of just the economics.
Danny, go back to the previous slide as you make this point. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we think about the supply and demand of these 5 areas of expertise, right, a post-closing activity can be typically managed. In some cases, it can be managed by technology, right? You can get Sales Boomerang or Monitor Base. You can get a CRM that sends out auto touches, right? You can actually automate a lot of this. Now, if you add humans behind the automation, you're going to get a better result. But the post-closing activity, let's say this is worth $1 an hour, right? And because you can automate it with technology. Transaction management is 10 times more valuable because the transaction management is going to inform how likely it is that somebody's going to go and report out to their friends and family, how likely they're going to be a raving fan, because that's the last impression they got of your business as it related to the help that they requested of you. You know, you got them keys to the house on time, you got them X dollars of savings on the refi and help them pay off debt or get their kids to college because you got some cash out for them. You know, that's the place where this happens. It's 10 times as valuable as post-closing. You go up the chain, you can pretty much 10X every single one of these. So 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. So leadership is rare and great leadership is even more rare. And so you think about these as all being 10X from the previous one, and it really inform the way that you decide where you want to delegate and where you want to manage.
So I think the point with that is that each of our hires, whether it's the first hire, the 5th hire, or the 50th hire, should be helping us push us more and more up that funnel, right? We want to be, if we're in the business of converting leads, that's where most of our time is spent, then the hire should help us get more into the lead generation and should take over that lead conversion. And then the next hire or 5 hires later, however many it takes to replace what you're doing in that podium position, should push you toward from lead generation into leadership. And so the idea is to continue to hire to support yourself so that you move yourself out of the low return on energy, low return on investment activities to your genius zone and these higher kind of importance activities. Anything anybody would add to that to just kind of paint the full picture here?
No, man, that was real well illustrated by both of you. I love it. It's really clear and succinct.
Yeah. So in terms of lead generation, obviously it's incredibly important, and you know that's probably likely all of your genius zones. Right? If you look at a lot of these things, that's going to be what you do, what you enjoy doing, what you're good at. Now, not to say you need to do all of these things individually, right? But you need to either participate in them or hire people that you can train to do them. So obviously, you know, nothing else below it happens unless this is done well.
This can be that zone of excellence that you were talking about, right, Ryan?
Yeah.
Where, you know, you're so good at it, even though it might not be the thing that's really high return on your energy, it is so high return on investment and you're good at it, you're better than everybody else. And so you it's easy to get trapped there.
Yes, very, very much so. Like most of these things are zone of excellence. There's very few that are actually, you know, genius zones. That's actually a good call out. You have to be real careful with that. And then just realize that your genius zone is likely going to be training people and inspiring people and leading people to do these types of things.
And Tribe, I want to offer one other perspective here. And this is a little bit different than kind of the main point of this slide, but I want to offer perspective that every single person on your team has a role in lead generation. You know, obviously post-closing, transaction management, right? There's activities that are happening there, right? Your underwriter is a lead generator. They oftentimes don't identify with that because the dots have not been connected for them as to how the way they condition a file, the speed at which they underwrite, processors, whether they, you know, get that file submitted today or they wait till the morning, right? Everyone in your process has a role in the experience that your client has as they're moving through the loan process, from the very first phone call all the way through the 10th annual financial review you're doing for that person, or your team is facilitating for that person, influences how likely it is that they're going to recommend you, or that they're going to bring other people into your sphere of influence that you can kind of bring into your business.
Yeah, the one thing that I would add on that as well. Sorry, Josh, you want to run with this?
No, go ahead, bud.
Perfect. Yeah, the one thing that I'll add on this is, we have been painting the picture of, the genius zone being leadership, but I don't want to I want to be careful to make sure that that doesn't pre-bias you to really try to identify that for yourself. This activity and this exercise is meant to identify where in this moment your genius zone is and help you really make sure that you're focusing your effort there. But I'll tell you one thing that's going to be important as well is identifying each individual in your team really where their genius zone is as well, because they're going to perform at an extremely high level. And are they a transaction manager? Are they great at lead conversion or the post-closing client for life aspect of it? And here's what comes out of that. And what really is powerful, and you guys have heard us talk about how impactful the infinite game has been. When you can identify that and you can place them in that role, you can create an environment or an organization where they wake up inspired, they feel safe and confident at work, and they go home fulfilled. And if you do that, you will create an absolute unstoppable business model.
I would say lead conversion is easily the area that I found in my business to be that zone of excellence trap for me. And that took me the hardest to kind of get away from. There's a lot of fear attached with lead conversion, partly because we work so hard to generate the leads. We work so hard to build the trust with those referral partners. And I can't tell you how many times, one of my team members would come to me and said, hey, they want to talk to you, right? This is even after the lead conversion step had happened. And, it took me a long time before I would go, you know what, you got this, right? Almost every time I would go, right, I'm the guy. Of course I need to, speak with them. My name's on the 1003. I got to do this, right? So does that resonate with any of you?
1000%.
We all have this. It started because most of us started in this industry by being the one who made the loan work, right?
Yeah.
By structuring the loan, by putting it together, by knowing how to make it work, by calming down the client, by inspiring the client, right? So that's, we were bred to have that feeling of importance, right? That's where we live. That's what we do. And getting out of that is really hard. And then when you get out a little bit, and then file starts to go sideways, you're like, Captain save the day, here we come, right? Come back in, and and then you solve the problem and you make the client happy and you have this euphoria and you're like, all right, that was cool, I'm going to do that again. You have to really purposefully work your way out of that feeling and realize that, empower somebody else to be Captain save the day, and train them to not have that happen in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, man, the dopamine hit from saving the day, and the ego about the guy who's on the 1003, and I think all that stuff's a lot harder to really empower somebody else to do that than people talk about, for those reasons, because you've worked so hard to get to this point, to build this business. And it's something that I think we've all struggled with, and some of us have turned the corner, better than others, but it is a tough one to get away from for sure.
So, team, in the interest of time, what we'll offer as a takeaway from this is lead conversion, transaction management, and post-closing activity, almost guaranteed for you, these will be your early hires, right? You focus on leadership, you focus on lead generation, you get lead conversion, transaction management, post-closing activity off of your plate. You'll realize what areas of your day, week, month are spent in these buckets by doing the time analysis. And then these slides, which will be available to you on the e-learning portal, will give you some ideas of, what the types of things you may also be adding into a job description for an individual person that you would hire to take some of those, clear, high ROI, low ROE activities off of your plate might be.
Yeah. And so, look, it may not seem like we've gotten really tactical around hiring your first person and creating a job description, but we have. We very sneakily have just broken down the whole thing into 5 different categories and given you subsets of hundreds of things that go on in a loan process you can literally go through there, pick the ones that you're really good at and give you a lot of energy and that you want to have in your system or currently already do. And the things that you're massively failing at that would make the biggest difference. And you've literally got a job description and a lot of direction around your first hire.
And then once you get to that place where you've crafted the beginning of a job description, we put this slide together as a tool for you to assess whether or not you're going to be able to clearly communicate to that new hire what it is that they're responsible for, and you have a deep understanding of why those are the things they're responsible for versus all of the other things that you could have put on their plate. And I'm not going to read this slide, word for word. This is really a matter of going through and ensuring that you have clarity of that role. Because again, going back to my multitude of failures around hiring, almost every time I misunderstood what my goal actually was. And I misunderstood what I wanted the impact to my business to be. And I didn't have the tools to clearly communicate that to the person coming in to say, this is what winning looks like in your first week. This is what winning looks like after 6 months. And then this is how our collective business will be transformed, because now you're a partner to me in this business. This is how our collective business will be transformed as you're, when you're here for years or decades.
Yeah, Danny, I completely agree with you. And going back to your initial opening where you talked about, hiring the barista, and it was probably because he or she just had a great charismatic personality, and they were kind, and you're like, I could see this person interacting with a client, or I could see myself getting along well with them, not taking into consideration what truly were the tactical roles and responsibilities that you were hiring in for. And so I think having that 3 to 4 kind of task or job role responsibilities and being very clear about that. Now, when you sit down and you go to interview, you can have the conversation around, hey, listen, here's what the expectations of this role are. Here's what the agreements that we're going to make. And you can have a conversation about that, and they're going to be able to identify for themselves, hey, is this something that I can thrive in? If you just come down and you sit and have, conversational interview, you're probably not going to get to the core of where is this person thrive? Are they actually going to be able to meet what my expectations are out of this role? Or are we just going to get somebody in that I would love to have a drink with, or, love to hang out with in my personal time? And, it's happened to all of us. I think we've made that hire. I know I've done it a number of times. And then you're scratching your head. You're like, God, they're a really good person, but they're just not living up to what I need out of the role. And then the second part on that slide that I really liked is to set that 1 week, that 1 month, that 6 month or 90 days and 180 days expectation of what success is in this role. And why that is so incredibly important is all of us have been new on a job or come new onto a team. And that there's a ramp up, and there's a lot of learning, and it creates insecurity because you aren't at the level where you need to get. And when that happens and your confidence is damaged, you actually perform at a lower level than if you create many wins and many milestones along the way. So if I come in and I say, hey, week 1, here's what's expected of me. And if I do this, I've won, I've delivered on what my agreement is. All of a sudden I'm motivated, I'm energized, I'm confident. So I think that having that clear expectation, even before you make the hire, when you sit down and you lay that out with the person you're interviewing, to be able to say, hey, this is what success looks like week 1 in the role. All of a sudden they buy in and they say, absolutely, I believe I can do that. And you can have conversations around how the implementation of that works.
And as you're going through, and that's awesome, Chris, I think you hit it right in the head, but I think as you're going through creating the job description, it will be led by your time tracking, right? Because it's going to be clear where the majority of your time is spent. Spoiler alert, it's going to be email, calling people who don't answer you, your CRM, taking applications, collecting documents. That's going to be where a lot of your time is spent. And so when you see the majority of that kind of red time, we got red time or things that are below the line, green times above the line, it'll really form, okay, like this is the job description I need for hire 1. And then you back out of those job responsibilities. And then you do that again, maybe 3 months later. And then you look, okay, say this person's taken a lot off my plate, but now what am I doing? There's your next hire. So the job description will be formed by doing that work. Mark's muted again.
I love the comments in the chat as well. Curtis just said that, he implemented really clear job roles for his team, and they all, responded extremely positively well. Extremely positively well. It's a lot of adjectives. But I love that, man. I think when you get clarity around what each person does, how it all fits into the process, and you create a really clear path for that person to grow, now you're going back to the mantra that Chris laid out there of, you want them to be inspired to come to work, feel safe while they're there, and go home fulfilled. It's really that simple. And if you're anything like me, when you're about to make this hire, I'll call Danny and I'll say, Danny, I'm gonna make this hire, man. What do you think? And Danny will give me this great advice. And then I'm gonna be like, Josh, hey, what do you think? And then Chris, and I'm gonna get everyone's opinion, because I've got fear around making this hire. And I think what I'll say to you as a word of advice is, you know exactly where your weaknesses are in your process. You know what gives you energy. You've done the time tracking exercise. Have faith in yourself. Create this job description. It does not need to be crazy. It can be very simple. The main 3 jobs, like Chris said. Don't overthink this.
Team, I want to offer one other thought to this too, and it's one of the questions. All the questions that are on that suggested question list are important, but one of the questions are, what are the skills necessary for a person to achieve the success this role is meant to create? So Mark mentioned we didn't sign up to be leaders. We definitely didn't sign up to be trainers, and so that's one area of massive weakness, right? Zone of incompetence that I definitely, walked into the buzzsaw on many times with the teams, is that I just believed that by joining onto the team, they would somehow learn by osmosis, right? That there was what exactly they needed to do. So if you have a clear understanding in your own mind of exactly what that person needs to do, right? If they're going to do a pre-approval, do they know how to calculate income? Do they know how to read a bank statement, right? There's very specific things that are required of that person to be successful in that role. And then you can assess, do they have the talents and skills necessary to be successful on day one? Or do we need to build capability in them in order for them to be successful on, by the end of month 3, by the end of month 6, and then having a clear path to a plan that will allow that new hire to kind of come into those skills. Because if you just believe they will naturally grow them without any intentionality on your side, you're setting yourself up to be hugely disappointed, and you're setting up that individual who's trusting you to kind of lead them into success. You're setting them up to fail.
Yeah, great point, Danny. And I think one of the things that will be helpful as we start talking about job descriptions now, we have created and we will make available for the team and for the tribe the job descriptions for kind of the standard, production partner 1, production partner 2, and can kind of help give some guidance. But again, we want you to take and break down and deconstruct for your team what that looks like. And so this isn't the end all be all, but hopefully it's a little bit of guidance that will help you guys as you're starting to have those identification analysis first, and then the conversations around hiring.
Hey, one more thing I just want, if you don't mind, Danny, just add one more thing to dovetail on that. It occurred to me that this is something I haven't done before, but now that I've recommitted to do this time block exercise again, the next hire that I bring into the team, I'm going to share with them what those genius activities are for me, and I'm going to tell them, my goal with this is to educate you and teach you a whole bunch of things that you need to do to further your education, which ultimately pushes me into this genius zone farther, so I can create more opportunities for all of us. And I need you to help me be accountable to that. So I'm actually gonna share that with them and ask them to help me to be accountable. I've never done that before, but I think it's a logical next step. So they see their role in the bigger picture, or the bigger role or objective of the team. So just want to share that last piece, and hopefully it works.
Josh, let me validate that for you, because I did actually take that step. And in fact, I did it after going through the insane productivity work with Darren Hardy. So and I found that to be very, very, helpful. And some of these same concepts that we're taking away here kind of are touched in on that. But I actually went to my team and I said, look, I have a couple of 45-minute to 90-minute blocks in my calendar in any given day. And here's what I'm going to do during that time. And here's how it's going to impact our business when I'm doing those things during that time. And here's how you benefit from me doing those activities during that time. And I would beg you, please, to protect that time for me. Help me protect that time and for myself, right? If you see it on my calendar, I've committed to this, and you see me walking to go get another cup of coffee or chatting, in the office, push me back into my office and shut the door. That's my time committed to you to do this work that is in my genius zone. And what I found was that they definitely took up that charge, and they protected that time with me and for me so that I could be doing the work for the business that was going to create the greatest results that they would then benefit from. So you're just enrolling everyone into this idea that, we all have a role to play in the collective success of the broader organization.
That's beautiful. Great share.
Yeah. That's really powerful, Danny. And it made me think back to numerous times, whether it be working with teams and really talking to their production partners. There is that common misconception that, what does he do all day long? Or what does she do all day long? They're out in the field, they're out doing this, and I'm here busting my ass in the office. And so I think if we can have those, conversations and set the agreements, hey guys, you need me to do this on a daily basis. Here's what that contributes to for our overall team success. But at the same time, you guys play a massive role in the success, and here's how you own it. So great validation of that, Danny, for sure.
And I think the last thing we wanted to touch on today, and we have pretty limited time to do it, and it's a pretty deep topic, and definitely one that seems to come up often, in the coaching sessions that I've had in the past, is this fear of delegation, right? We touched on it a little bit and alluded to it here, but I want to reflect back on something Ryan said that I think was really powerful. Because you are good at what you do, you're part of a tribe, and you're investing in yourself, you're investing in your business. It is your obligation to grow, and it is your responsibility to spread the talents that you have to help more families. And that can only be done if you, just to said really bluntly, if you get out of your own way.
Yeah.
Right. And you invite people in to help you in your business. There's no way to do it otherwise, right? The only alternative is working, 30 hours a day. There's not 30 hours in a day. You need to leverage your talents and bring people in to support you and support each other if you're going to reach that 100% version of yourself. Does anyone want to add to that?
Yeah,
well, I think go ahead, Josh.
I would just say that, one way that I look at it is it can almost be selfish that I'm holding on to a role or responsibility that somebody else in the team could take that opportunity. It's only if I get the freak out of the way so somebody else can take what I'm doing that they can grow. Leaders can actually become the stopgap or the bottleneck in the business because they're afraid to move and afraid to delegate and relinquish their responsibilities, which is actually in some ways mistreating those people that want that same opportunity. So if we flip it that way, it's a little different way to look at it, and at least it helped me dislodge and move up the totem pole a little bit.
Yeah, and I think if we look at both of the comments in the Facebook chat, one user said, "Oh my God, this is why I'm so tired all the time. Too much low ROE stuff." If you're stagnant, if you're not growing, to Josh's point, and you're not pushing yourself into that next category where you're uncomfortable, you're not growing. And if you're not growing and you're stagnant, you're going to be sad. It's going to be hard to get out of bed in the morning. You're not going to be motivated in this business, especially if you're going to be in this business for a long time. You have to find ways to reinvent yourself. And Curtis's comment of creating a really clear path for your person. Like, if you don't create a clear path for them to grow and get into the next place, they're stagnant and they're not being fulfilled. And so it just continues to be this cycle. You have to continually grow and push yourself to do that. So I think, that's the motivation to get out of this space where you're the hero and you've got these dopamine hits coming. It's one of the most, difficult parts to do. Guys, I've thoroughly enjoyed being on this call. I'm so glad to be alongside you and all the other members of the tribe. And guys, if you know anyone who's awesome, who loves to collaborate this way, we would love to just grow this community bigger. It really does feed our soul.
Yeah, team, eventually the goal is to have live events, and we want to have the coolest, brightest, and most open and vulnerable sharers possible that can contribute to the tribe. So if you know someone that should be in the tribe, drop us an email or drop it in the Facebook chat so we'll have their contact info. And thanks a lot. It was a great time hanging out with everybody today.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
See you on the next call.